if you look at Biden administration and their time in office, the fact that America was such a steadfast friend to Israel, to have Antony Blinken now in a rare interview, his first big sit down to say there is a legitimate question, I think does put pressure on Israel too when it comes to justifying some of their recent actions.
So let's now welcome to the programme Katy Balls, who's the Washington editor and columnist for the Times and Sunday Times. Hi to you, Katy.
Hi.
Hi, Katy. And Leslie Avinjamuri is here, the director of the US and Americas programme at Chatham House, the think tank. Leslie, hi.
Hi.
Leslie, welcome. Katy, can we come to you first? So Antony Blinken, you were listening, I know, to the first part of my conversation with Antony Blinken. Blinken, he has been, hasn't he, in office and out, a strong supporter of Israel. In office, he helped to arm Israel. To hear him say what he said about the accusation, the suggestion of Israeli war crimes in Gaza being a legitimate question, that will sting in Israel, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. And as you say, if you look at Biden administration and their time in office, the fact that America was such a steadfast friend to Israel, to have Antony Blinken now in a rare interview, his first big sit down to say there is a legitimate question, I think does put pressure on Israel too when it comes to justifying some of their recent actions.
Leslie, what do you think?
I think that, I saw it a little bit as he turned it to a question for the lawyers. And actually, we saw that response quite often throughout President Biden's administration, that when these sorts of questions about the nature of atrocities, the crimes, there was a sort of decision to defer it to the lawyers. But we know, right, that there were divisions within the Biden administration, that there were many high-ranking officials within the administration that asked Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, President Biden to exercise more restraint, to put more pressure on Israel when it came to questions of delivering humanitarian aid and its operations, its military operations in Gaza. So I think we were just hearing perhaps more of the former secretary's frustrations about the situation, that the ceasefire has not held, that the plan has not gone to plan, so to speak, but still quite cautious and moderated. I mean, I thought the one very interesting and not in a good way comment there was, that they estimate that there is many people that have been recruited to the ranks of Hamas now as were originally there, despite the fact that, of course, Israel has successfully gotten many of the individuals initially.
And that is quite a telling observation, and you're absolutely right. This is the America's former diplomat in chief saying that lawyers will determine in the end any question of legality or criminality of particular actions. But to call it a legitimate question, I think, adds another layer. His view, Katy, seems to have hardened on that subject over recent weeks and months.
Yes, and of course, in the interview, I mean, he also did talk about more pressure on Hamas, suggesting that this was a two-way street, and returning to October the 7th, the fact that, as you have to look to Israel. So I think you were seeing an approach to be even-handed on it and not look as though you're saying, oh, this is all on Israel.
Oh, sure.
But certainly, I think as you have seen, these questions about humanitarian aid, the blockade and others, it is leading to a situation where I think, and you can even see it in the current White House, for slightly different reasons, there is growing frustration on the American side, I think, with Israel and some of the decisions they are taking.
Yeah, and you'll have noticed that at the very beginning of the conversation, I made the point as clearly as possible that the behaviour, the murderous behaviour of Hamas, is beyond reasonable question. Their conduct has been absolutely atrocious and horrifying. That seemed to me to be pretty much beyond reasonable dispute, which is why I focused as I did on the question of Israel, a democracy, an ally to America, one that's had American support, and now finds itself in another area of particular controversy. Katy, I also mentioned, didn't I, the subject of this jet, which I think is getting quite a lot of play in the American media, where you are this Boeing 747, a jumbo jet, luxurious in every possible way. I've seen pictures of the interior. It's been called palatial. Well, Blinken was not impressed.
No, and it's definitely the talk in, as you say, in the American media. And it's one of those stories where you've had, for example, some in the Trump base already come out and be very critical. Laura Loomer, the far right blogger, friend of Trump sometimes, who has quite a big following and very loyal to Trump, saying he should not take this. And certainly some of Trump's usual supporters haven't come out to defend the decision.
Yes.
So, of course, I think probably Donald Trump pays less attention to what members of the Biden administration say than some of his own base. But
Yes.
it's interesting to hear Antony Blinken citing potential security concerns. Also, how long would it take to fix those things? Is this a practical gift, let alone a moral gift, or one that, is befitting of what a president should accept?
Yes.
And I think that what is uncomfortable for Donald Trump when it comes to this gift is it does not feel as though it's one of those fights where the Republicans say one thing and the Democrats say another.
Yes.
There's quite a lot of incredulity generally spread about this, and you can see it in the sense that the White House haven't quite got their message nailed down on what they are saying this gift is or how it manifests.
And Leslie, it would have been entirely unimaginable for an American president to receive the gift of a customized luxury Boeing 747 from a foreign country. Well, I suppose before the second term of Donald Trump. There is a law which, as far as I vaguely understand it, is explicitly against this sort of thing. The Emoluments Act. I mean, tell us about it.
No, exactly, and as a gift, as the Secretary Blinken had said, above a certain level, a gift from a foreign government simply isn't allowed. It isn't allowed legally. It isn't a good idea. It raises security concerns. I'm not persuaded that we, at the end of the day, will see that gift accepted and it used.
Really?
In effect, I think that the pushback will be significant. I think that there's one thing sort of pushing the boundaries of allowing your family to have business transactions that in effect come on the back of the fact that you're the president of the United States. That in and of itself is deeply problematic. But this is such an obvious violation, and the fact that it crosses over not only a legal violation but a very clear potential security concern. I suspect that people who are on the president's side will get in his ear and say to him, this is really not a good idea. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But it's clearly an abrogation of the norms, if not the law.
Who would do that, Leslie? I mean, who around in that inner circle has got the clout to tell Donald Trump, who clearly loves the idea of this luxury Boeing 747, that he shouldn't take it? Are you thinking of someone like Susie Wiles, the chief of staff? She's got an awful lot of.
But I think there will be a number of people, because it's not sort of on the margins. It's really kind of dead center problematic, and we have seen signs on any number of issues that whatever we think of Donald Trump, he is not the most ideological person. He is kind of an impulsive, instinctive leader who is watching, is listening, does change his mind, does adjust, doesn't do it in the most strategic way, but he does react to the evidence that sort of comes his way.
Yes.
Not as quickly as many people would like to see, not as dramatically as many people would like to see, but he doesn't set a policy and stay with it. That's not been his mode so far. So I think, again, this is another one of those that we'll have to watch and see what he actually does. But it's quite, it's not really one of those that's very ambiguous. It's pretty clear that this is the wrong thing to do.
I mean, Katy, you're fresh into Washington from Westminster. It is still astonishing, I think, to conventional political ears like mine, to hear the question of corruption raised against an American president in the way that has now become fairly common currency. There's this question of the aircraft, but there's another matter, huge matter really, which is not about illegality, but the president having floated a cryptocurrency on the eve of his inauguration, a meme coin, as it were, using his position to promote that. That's worth, we're talking about not just millions, not just tens of millions, we're talking about hundreds of billions.
Yes, and obviously having come just from Westminster, where we began the year talking about Wardrobe Gate and whether Keir Starmer's paying for his own suits and donors and so forth, it's definitely a different scale and a different level in America. You look at the price of that plane and some of the debates on freebies in the UK start to, look pretty insignificant in comparison. But to your point about crypto, I think there's definitely a feel when you speak to figures in Washington that this is a administration that is slightly on the make, perhaps. And, some of this is technically within the rules. Some of it is potentially just going to new ground and no one is quite sure whether it is within the rules, because it is a new thing. But you look at, for example, even the tour in the Middle East that Donald Trump is on. There was so much about this tour, which is, there's talk of peace, brokering peace deals. There's also a lot of talk of real estate and potential developments. There's questions about whether members of the Trump family are going to benefit in the future when it comes to developments, Trump towers and so forth. So I think there's a real merging of politics and financial interest in a way that probably feels quite foreign to UK politics. And then the question of, wait, is some of this legitimate and which bits are the ones that actually cross the line? But certainly I think money and politics, as someone who's just been a couple of weeks, they clearly mix very differently in America, I think, than they do to the UK.
You can say that again and underline it. It's the idea of there's to be a golf club and resort in Qatar where the president's going to be stopping off, and also I think a Trump Tower in the United Arab Emirates.
That's before you get to the Gaza Riviera, of course.
Of course, before you get.
I've got to jump in here, John, because I think that, to be fair, this is very alien to most Americans. That sure, there's no doubt about it. We have laws that allow very large amounts of money to go in to back political candidates during elections.
Yes.
Laws that many people don't agree with that have gone to the Supreme Court. Money in politics is a big thing. However, there aren't very many people that are comfortable with the violation, the perception that there is something very different going on right now, that the president is using the greatest, highest office in the land for the personal gain, potentially of himself and of his family, that he is pushing the boundaries of what is legitimate, legal, moral, and fair when it comes to questions of crypto. And it is something that most people just simply are not familiar with. So they're trying to understand it, understand the legality, understand the practicality, understand the significance. But I don't think that it's just a question of the US is different from the UK. Not at all. I think many people are deeply, deeply concerned, and not only about the policies, but about the willingness of the president to push the boundaries of things that, they're somewhere, in some cases, in between what seem to be normatively unacceptable and what seem to be legally unacceptable. There's a lot in that gray zone. We learned that in the first Trump administration. We're seeing it again, but there are certain things that are just, legally out of bounds too. So I think it is. I think it's not as different as perhaps.
No. So interesting, Leslie, to get your thoughts, and thanks too to Katy Balls, Washington editor of The Times.